Good evening, everyone. Welcome to City Hall for the regular meeting of the City Council here on February 20th, 7 p.m. Call the meeting to order and ask Carla to conduct the roll call, please.
Beaufore. Here. Birgen.
Here I am.
Meyers. Here. Kangas.
Present.
Rathe.
Present.
Schneider. Is absent.
And also welcome back to our guest council person. Glad to have you back. We'll move into item C, Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's quite an amazing sound from up here. Usually it's crickets.
Us.
Just Rich and us. All right, move into item D, the approval of the agenda.
I will move approval of the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Birgen, second by Schneider. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carries. Item E is the approval of minutes.
I'll move approval of the January 28th, 2023 budget session meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion by Meyers, second by Birgen. Any discussion there? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carries. Got a slate of public hearings under section F this evening. The first one, number 1, this is the date, time, and place for a public hearing to set the maximum property tax dollars for the city's proposed fiscal year 2023-2024 budget. Rathe, have we received any written or oral comments?
We have not, Your Honor.
Thank you. Are there any public comments on this matter, item 1 under section F? See nobody arise. Entertain a motion to close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of Resolution 23-24, approving the maximum property tax dollars from certain levies for the city's proposed fiscal year 2023 to 24 budget.
Second.
Motion by Rathe, second by Birgen. Council discussion, if any. Hearing none, roll call, Carla.
Beaufore.
Yes.
Birgen.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
Meyers.
Yes.
Rathe.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
On a vote of 6-0 with 1 absent, the public hearing for the proposed fiscal year budget is approved on that resolution 23-24. Item 1A is to set the public hearing date for the fiscal year 2024 budget. Entertain a motion.
I move to approve setting the public hearing date for fiscal year 2024 budget for March 6, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of City Hall.
Second.
Motion by Schneider, second by Birgen. Council discussion, if any.
That's my birthday.
Do we need to bring cake?
Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Motion carries. Moves us to item 2. This is the date, time, and place for a public hearing on Ordinance 1120, amending Chapter 100.4.06, Section 100.13, and Section 100.15 of the Waverly Municipal Code. Have we received any written or oral comments, Carla?
We have not, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any public comments for this item on the agenda? See nobody rise, we'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I will move approval of the second reading of Ordinance 1120, amending Chapter 100.4.06, Section 100.13, and Section 100.15 of the Waverly Municipal Code.
Second.
Motion by Birgen, second by Kangas. Council discussion, if any. Hearing none, roll call, Carla.
Birgen.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
Meyers.
Yes.
Rathe.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
Beaufore.
Yes.
A vote of 6-0 and 1 absent. The second reading of Ordinance 1120 is approved. Item 3, this is the date, time, and place for a public hearing on the adoption of a comprehensive plan, update, and new future land use map for the City of Waverly pursuant to Chapter 18B of the Iowa Code. Carla, have we received any written or oral comments?
We have not, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any public comments on this item on the agenda? You certainly may come forward.
Okay.
State your name and your association. and-
Chris Jansen with MSA Professional Services, and I do you want a little presentation, or are you guys pretty comfortable with where things are?
I'll leave that up to Bill and James on this matter of,
Planning and zoning, we're in favor of it, so
that may
ready to go.
be found to not be necessary at this time. Appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
We may get to public or council discussion, you may be engaged there, but thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments that may come before us this evening on this item? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of Resolution 23-25, adopting a comprehensive plan update and new future land use map for the City of Waverly pursuant to Chapter 18B of the Iowa Code.
Second.
Motion by Rathe, second by Meyers. Council discussion?
Just a lot of work goes into this. I appreciate MSA's help in putting this together, and also all of the public's input and the commission's input that went into this.
Absolutely. And if you haven't documented in the record MSA's presence, that would be appreciated. Anything further? Hearing nothing, roll call, Carla.
Kangas,
Yes.
Meyers.
Yes.
Rathe.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
Beaufore.
Yes.
Birgen.
Yes.
Vote of 6-0 with one absent, Resolution 23-25 is approved. Item 4, this is the date, time, and place for a public hearing on the proposition of the issuance of not to exceed $2,700,000 of general obligation bonds of the City of Waverly, State of Iowa for essential corporate purposes, or ECP. Carla, have we received any written or oral comments?
We have not, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any public comments for this item on the agenda this evening? Seeing nobody rise, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of Resolution 23-26, a resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed $2,700,000 general obligation bonds for ECP.
Second.
Motion by Meyers, second by Kangas. Council discussion, if any?
Maybe just a reminder of the projects. There's several projects that are in here.
Yes, ma'am. The project's included in the ECP, and we probably should state that for the public hearing too. Actually, I just thought about that. So we have matching funds for the airport that we're using the expansion for the runway, the water projects that we've talked about, including our water tower reconditioning, the removal of the tail race in the Cedar River, the traffic beacons that we decided to include last meeting, and I think that is it.
Okay.
It's not the runway at the airport, it's the taxiway.
The taxiway, excuse me, you're correct.
Thank you.
Anything further? Hearing none, roll call, Carla.
Kangas.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Rathe.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
Beaufort.
Yes.
Bergen.
Yes.
On a vote of 6-0 and one absent, Resolution 23-26 is approved. Item number 5, this is the date, time, and place for a public hearing on the proposition of the issuance of not to exceed $700,000 general obligation bonds of the City of Waverly, State of Iowa for general corporate purposes, GCP-1. Carla, have we received any written or oral comments?
We have, Your Honor. I received from Edie Waldstein, Deanna McHugh, and Fred Rivich, all in favor of this bond.
Okay. Those will be received into the record. I know that I believe the council had received all of those. Carla either forwarded them on, or those individuals sent those directly to that, so we won't recite those. Any public comments this evening? Entertain those at this time. I ask that when you come up, clearly state your name, your address, and speak into the microphone so everybody can hear you.
I'm Jack Wren, and I'm with Waverly Public Library. So I just kind of wanted to come and share my story with the library today. On the webpage, I recently left my own testimony, which I recommend you check out. There are other great stories on there as well, but I just kind of wanted to go over what I talked about in that because I've had a lot of experiences with the library, and I think this new teen edition would be able to provide the community with more great experiences. So through the library, I've done a lot of different stuff. I'm currently part of the Teen Advisory Board at the library, and we meet monthly, maybe twice a month, and help plan the different programs and events. And that's a great group to be a part of. I've included it on my applications and resumes. I love being part of that group. And then aside from that, in my past, I've been part of the summer reading programs. I've had birthdays there. My stepmom has a daycare, and she takes them there once or twice a week. It's a fun place for them to hang out. The summer programs, like I said, and then they have a bunch of fun events like puzzle nights, Nerf nights. They have Minecraft community events. I think it's just a really great place for the community to go and reach out with each other and connect through many different experiences. And I think that although I'll be gone for this teen edition, I have younger siblings who will be teenagers soon, and I want them to experience that too, because I know that a lot of the younger population isn't going to the library as much, even as my grade is, just that few-year gap, and I think that this will draw more people in. And I mean, it is a great place to go if you're stressed about homework. It's a nice, quiet place that you can get that done. If you want to have fun and make new friends, which I have, you can go to those events. You can join the Teen Advisory, and you can get those experiences through that. And I know that my younger siblings would appreciate that, and the daycare kids, I think that they would continue to go to the library. I think that this teen edition would just be a great space for the library to host those events.
Thank you, Jen. Anyone else?
All right, my name is Xavier Bading, and I live at 2412 Park 2nd Avenue Northwest, and I go to the high school here, Waverly Shell Rock High School, where I'm a sophomore. So the library has been a really important part of my life. I moved here in 2nd grade, and it was really important for me to have a library that had a lot of programs and things to do. The summer reading program and all of the fun events during the school year were really great for me in those sort of developing years. And now, as a teenager, I do all sorts of things at the library. I go there for studying, to read. I go there and play games with my brother on the Nintendo Switch sometimes. It's a lot of fun. Nerf night on the last Friday of every month is a blast. And I think that this addition would really help to improve all of the stuff at the library, giving more space for all of the age groups. If you go there on a Wednesday afternoon after school, it is like packed. And I think we need some more space there, and this addition would really help with that. And also, I think that the foundation of an educated community is the library, and we will show, as Waverly, that our community values education and knowledge by funding something like this, and really showing that knowledge and education are super important. And I mean, it's obviously that's what makes a successful township, is the knowledge and the education of the community. So that's really about all I have to say on that.
Thanks, Xavier. Anyone else like to step forward? I don't want to shut anybody down that's here.
I'm Kathy Folkers, and I'm just here to support the library, but honestly, I couldn't say anything better than those last two, so that was awesome. One of our grandsons went to the library. He spent a lot of Saturdays at the library with his friends, having fun and that kind of thing. It's just a great community center, and honestly, we just don't have enough for teenagers to do, and if they can go to the library and spend all afternoon, what better place would there be to be on a Saturday? So, and I don't even know half of the stuff that they're doing. We were called on to make a gift, and we did, because we just think it's really important. And so I appreciate your support of the library, and I certainly support it too.
Thanks, Kathy. All right, I'm not going to make anybody but last call before we close the public hearing. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I will move approval of Resolution 23-27, a resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed $700,000 general obligation bonds, GCP1.
Second.
Motion by Birgen, second by Rathe. Council discussion.
I just think it was great to hear from the youth of the community, especially Kathy.
Wow. I surely thought Mary Ventula would have gotten up here then too.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing, I mean, what can you say after that? They're a hard act to follow. So, you know, we were chatting before the meeting, I think the contrast of what the library is like now compared to when I was a kid. I mean, I loved going to the library, but the library was just about books. That was it. And usually, I was the only person my age in the library. But, you know, it's become a community center, and there aren't that many places where anybody can walk in the door, regardless of what color you are, your socioeconomic status, and even whether you can read and write. Everybody is welcome there, and I totally agree with Xavier. You know, an educated populace is what makes a city great. And so, for me, it's a no-brainer that we need to support it. So I really appreciate these guys coming and talking. It takes guts to get up in front of a bunch of old people and talk, so thank you for coming, you guys.
I'd like to add that it made a big impact on me, the amount of input we had from the public via emails and calls. And I think that says a lot about what our community is asking for and what they will support. And I appreciated that input.
You know, people often ask what's on council, what's the hardest decision you've had on council? And 3 years and a few months into this, and I really don't have a good answer, but I think after this vote, I will. This is a very difficult decision because we've got quite a storm headed our way. You know, when you think about storms, you know, the street department to prepare for a storm, they get the blades ready, make sure you've got enough sand and salt, make sure that all the trucks are ready, and I'm sure a various number of other things we do to prepare for a storm. In a summer storm, you know, we take the patio furniture in, we do certain things, but from my view, we're looking at a financial storm that if we don't handle this properly, I think we could run into a very serious situation. You know, we just, you know, what's our maximum, 7.7%? So, you know, if we had that kind of inflation sustained, you know, 10 years, this is a 10-year bond. If you have $1 million department over 10 years, that's a $2 million department at the end of the 10 years. So that inflation really crowds out the budget very, very quickly. And I believe that's what we're running into. Now, I know that's what we're running into for the next year, maybe two. Hopefully it subsides by then. You know, I think it will. I think we've seen that in some areas, but we're a long, long ways from getting out of this mess. I mean, and then I'm looking at other economic data points, and I don't want to alarm anybody, but you know, the one data point that I look at to kind of know exactly where things are going is cardboard boxes, cardboard corrugate, because it's not political. It disassociates itself from all kinds of numbers that the media could put out there. But cardboard boxes is something that everyone uses. Everything that we get, you know, mostly comes in cardboard. Q1 of last year, cardboard was flat. Then it went -2 in Q2. In Q3, it was -6. In Q4, cardboard corrugate sales were -8.3. We're probably -10 this quarter, which means we're already in a pretty serious pullback without recognition by the Federal Reserve, who keeps pushing up rates. That's very, very concerning to me that they're doing that. You know, it's almost like they're purposefully taking down the economy. It's probably what's going on. So we have to prepare for that. And, you know, I'm on the fence on the Parks building. We'll talk about that here shortly. Some of this other stuff, it's difficult to be on the fence on, but I want to make sure that we're prepared so that in the 25 budget, 26 budget, we don't, you know, we do have a little bit more runway, I think, but after that runway is gone, then we have to start, you know, cutting staff or rapidly hiking taxes. And when you have departments that go from $1 million to $2 million in 10 years, that's a serious situation. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised in a couple budgets from now, all of the optionals are gone. What's great news is we have wonderful infrastructure. I think we're ready. I think staff's ready for this. And I think things will be fine. So that makes this very, very difficult.
I have to agree that this is probably a really difficult. I am for the library. I believe that it is absolutely a necessary part of our community. It's a beautiful building. We have obviously some very dedicated staff, educated staff, volunteers, the board, and wonderful support in the community for the library, and that's awesome to see. And it does make my decision a little bit easier sitting up here to know that there's a lot of support out there for the library. I think that we do need to look at necessary items right now for the budget. And some things are necessary and some things are not. You know, when I looked at the plan today again for the library, you know, I saw needed to be more accessible. Absolutely, we need that to be changed. That needs to be done. You know, the teen tech and youth lounge, I think that is necessary. The square footage to be added on to is necessary. Or just a library. It is a community center. I do believe that there are a lot of other options out there for funding for the library and a lot of generous people that support it. So, you know, I appreciate the support that I see for the library here today and in the community. So thank you for being here, and to Jack and Xavier, thank you so much for coming up here and being leaders in, you know, your community there as well. So thank you.
I think this $700,000 bond is a unique opportunity because this is one of those times when $700,000 is more than $700,000. This money that we spend is necessary for many of the grants that we're applying for. So there's probably $300,000 in grants that we're applying for to help pay for this project. But required for those grants is city support. So it's important that the city puts our money where our mouth is. You know, we're talking about how much we value the library. I think we have to put some money into it, you know, to prove that evidence. I think it is also my understanding from the fundraising point of view that there are a lot of people who, before they're willing to turn their check over, want to know that the city is behind this as well. So this is one of those cases where, you know, we're committing $700,000, but the impact is more than $700,000. So I see, you know, it's foolish to me, you know, what do they say, you know, penny wise and pound foolish, that, you know, we're worrying about small dollar amounts where this is money that we can spend that will have a much larger impact than just the dollars that we're spending. And I mean, everyone else has spoken, you know, the importance of the library. I mean, I appreciated Jack and Xavier coming up and really talking about the soul of our community and how much we appreciate and value education in this community. I'd like to point out that we had a $700,000 bond for ball diamonds that passed unanimously, and it seems to me that if we can put down $700,000 for ball diamonds, we can put down $700,000 for the library. So that's my attitude.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, you know, as, you know, I appreciate Matt's concern about the national economy and inflation. I guess one thing I like about local government is I can wrap my brain around the financing a little better than I can wrap it around the national scene. And I think that we've been assured by our city administrator that we are in good financial shape. We have the debt capacity to do this. The community has shown that they are putting their money where their mouths are and where their beliefs are, and I think we need to support that. There's really no reason to back out at this point. And you know, the library board, the foundation, they put a lot of time and effort, and the staff into this plan, thinking it over. It's very detailed. I don't think it's our job to micromanage that or to decide which parts of the expansion. Leave that up to the experts that have worked on it. So, you know, we want Waverly to continue to grow, to continue to expand our tax base, and it is projects like this that are going to show newcomers to our community or people who are considering moving here that this is what we value. And yeah, Waverly is known as a huge sports town, and I would like smart kids to get the same benefits that athletic kids get.
I would echo those sentiments as well, and one of the things that keeps coming to my mind is we frequently hear and see in comments online that there's not enough activities in Waverly for young people to do. And we hear and read a lot about why don't we have a bowling alley and why don't we have the theater, both of which hopefully we will have again in the future. But the library strikes me as a resource that is for everybody. And as Dr. Rathe said, it's not like when we were kids and it was just where the nerdy geeks went. It really has something for everybody. And I think it's a place where diversity really thrives and where our community can thrive because that diversity is fostered and where it can grow regardless of what your interests are, whether you're young or old. And I really can't think of another resource in town that serves the same breadth of people and interests and does it for free. And I just think that it's really hard to put enough value on that. It's a huge asset to our community, and I really think we need to support it.
When you talk about, diversity and inclusion and, when you say that's the one resource that does, it kind of, for me, it kind of hits like, well, why isn't every part of Waverly like that? Why isn't every part of Waverly like that then?
Well, there are parts that are like that, but I don't think we have a community gathering space like the library. We just don't. And Julie's sort of implying that I was a nerdy geek in high school, which is fine because I embraced my nerdy geekness. It got me where I am today, right? So, but we don't have gathering places. I mean, hopefully we will, but.
Well, the experiences that Jack and Xavier are talking about, will those experiences go away if we don't do this expansion? I guess is a question.
Well, they won't expand, right? I think as
But does
Jack put it, they're bursting at the seams after
go
school.
away?
I don't know.
Well, I think that as demand on the library increases, their ability to service every opportunity decreases. I mean, I know that there was some discussion at the library board that, we know that they applied to turn a part-time position into a full-time position, and that was one of the things that got left out of the budget because we decided that was something that needed to be cut. Because of that, there will be times when there are daycares or schools that ask, can you have a librarian come visit us today? And the librarians will have to say no, because we don't have the staff to do it. So if we're talking about, what will happen, what will they lose if they don't have this expansion? Well, they won't lose anything as much as there will be lost opportunities for things that we can't do. There will be, so if you remember this past summer, there was an event where they had sharks for petting, and there were many hundreds of kids who were there to come pet sharks. And they were pushing capacity. I'm really glad that no one called the fire department to check if they were exceeding the allowable capacity for the building that day. There will be certain events that they can't do because they don't have the space for them. So what will be left out? There will be things that they can't do if they don't have this expansion. Will we notice them? Probably not if we don't know the opportunities we don't have. But to say that it won't have an impact, I don't think is looking at the big picture and the amount of growth that we have had in this town. Waverly is one of the few communities that continues to grow, and we are growing through our youth. And as that growth continues, we are pushing the capacity for the library.
Well, I think the other thing we lose is that they if kids who like the library see that we don't vote to support it, they lose faith in us. I mean, what they hear is that we don't support their library. And I think that, I mean, how do you put a price tag on that? You know, kids, even kids who are different, who don't fit the mold these days are under attack. You know, whether it's because they're transgender or they are, I don't know, they dress differently or they have different interests or they're not athletic or they're not popular. And I think that we need to show the kids of this community that we believe in this project. And I'm surprised we're debating it as much as we are. But I think what they lose is they lose faith in us as the people who hold the purse strings to do things for them. And I don't have a price tag to put on that.
It seems like, and what Brian said, is that the library has to grow proportional to the growth of your community. And as your community expands, so does the library. Especially on the economic side, if you want to continue to recruit and retain young people, professionals, people with families, that the library is one of those quality of life in the community places that you want to invest in, especially as you look towards the future. You know, you want to retain, hopefully, both of those young gentlemen in a community like Waverly, because they had such a great experience at the library, and that means something to them. So that someday they will provide meaningful tax base to the next generation. And that's what the library brings, you know, full circle to the city of Waverly.
James, just to put some numbers with this, we've got a couple of these bonds. What is the tax hit on the $700,000?
It's a terrible question to ask, Tim.
Right now, especially.
The hard part is the way we construct this, because we do know what we're doing when it comes to managing debt. So as we talked about it in the budget, your first year, fiscal '24, we're building, we're only going to pay interest only on this bond. You know, I've told you I hate doing that, and I do. But we have another bond falling off that's the same size as this one. So if you start paying when that one's gone, you have no impact to the debt levy. It's a zero increase, zero impact. Even this year, with the interest we will be paying, the levy for debt service itself goes down 5 cents. So it's not an increase. What you're not seeing is the reduction that could have happened, let's say, in a couple years. So it's not so much the increase, it's the lack of a decrease potentially. But odds are with pool project and trail bridge and everything else, you would not have seen that reduction anyway. It's just a matter of this particular bond, this particular item, which this is a piece of 5 different hearings, it's not by itself solely. You will not see a quote increase due to this bond in the next couple of years. As I said, you will not see a decrease as it may have fallen off going forward. I think that's the best I can answer for you.
Just
So would it be fair to say this is kind of like as I'm paying down the mortgage on my home and I decide I want to make some improvements on my home, so I take out a home equity loan and the payments on that kind of replace my decreased mortgage payments?
Sure. I think it's fair enough to say that. I have a hard time making analogies like that because not everybody understands some of those, but as I'm saying, it does not have an increase. It just prevents a decrease that could happen in 2 years.
Essentially, you're extending the $700K note out another 10 years, well, another 11 years in this case, right?
Well, the $4.5 million bond would go out for 10. This one in particular, size of the payment would extend it 2. That's how I guess I would look at it.
Where are you seeing rates come in?
We're looking at 5 or less, we're hoping, when this goes to market. But again, you're talking May. You'll have to see what the Fed does in the meantime. But I think, like I said, we'll get into the audit and everything later. I know people are concerned about that. We're financially still very strong. It's not as good as I want it to be because I'm selfish like that. But we are very strong compared to most cities around us. So I think our rates will be very favorable and we'll be better than market, but market's not great. But I still think we'll be better than market when we go to bond.
Our library has morphed into a community center, and I think that's a wonderful thing that we need to keep pushing. But, you know, I'm looking at this storm And I think we have to be more, I don't think I haven't heard the city be serious about it until maybe some of this other stuff, which isn't really related.
Right.
But I think we have to be serious about what's coming. And the other point I want to make here is, you know, if we were on this one and item 6 coming up here, if we were another dollar more, we'd have to go to referendum, and how would that shake out in the public? I don't know exactly that answer, because those referendum votes come in kind of odd sometimes, but that is something that I'm considering, is rather than voting for how I feel, understand if this did go to referendum, how that vote would shake out.
I think the best indication we have, best being a relative term, of what that referendum would be like is the input that we've gotten from the public.
Can I call the question?
I was going to call the question, I won't make you go to the vote, so can I ask, hearing nothing further, I would like to make just one comment to the fact of what that was referring to is, I appreciate, no matter how this turns out, I appreciate everybody's engagement through emails, phone calls that may have happened, face-to-face, showing up in person, coming up to the podium, all those things make a difference in your community, regardless of the outcome. There was an allusion there made very briefly that could be a turnoff to people engaging with your elected officials. No matter what happens here, continue to engage. With that, roll call, Carl.
Myers.
Yes.
Rathe.
Yes.
Schneider.
No.
Beaufore.
No.
Birgen.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
On a vote of 4-2 with 1 absent, resolution 2327 does not pass.
Pardon me?
No, it passes.
4-2.
Passes, sorry. I apologize. I thought we were on the 5 rule. I
No, not on this one.
sincerely apologize. Passes 4-2. We'll try to get this next one right. Item 6, this is the date, time, and place for a public hearing on the proposition of the issuance of not to exceed $700,000 general obligation bonds of the City of Waverly, State of Iowa for general corporate purposes, GPC 2. We received any written or oral comments, Carla?
We have not, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any public comments on this agenda item? Seeing nobody rise, we'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I will move approval of Resolution 23-28, a resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed $700,000 general obligation bonds, GCP2.
Second.
Motion by Birgen, second by Rathe. Council discussion.
So this is for the Parks Maintenance Building, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And I have
This is to finish the
visited that
remodel that we started a
building,
year ago.
which is sorely in need of remodeling.
It's fairly rough, you are correct.
It's rough, and so I am in favor of this. You know, we have a wonderful park staff, leisure services staff. They are lean, you know, we don't have very many people that work full-time. They have a ton of responsibility. They need extra storage space. They need a decent place to do paperwork, to have their department meetings, et cetera, and it is in rough shape, so I'm in favor of this.
When would we look at bidding this out?
We would probably do this in late fall, early winter, so we get the best bids. 'Cause
Sure.
we'd still want to make sure we get engineering plans, et cetera, developed by the time the funding comes here in July.
So what happens, you know, if this passes and, you know, conditions change and you look at this and it's like, maybe we should look at do we repay that bond back immediately? Is that what has to happen, or
It
what?
wouldn't be immediate. You would put this into somewhat of an escrow account, or you would hold it for a certain amount of time. I think we have 36 months for construction to deplete the funds. So you would use it to pay down the bond, whichever portion that would have been, and when it gets to the point of being callable, which I think will be 6 years out, then you could exhaust the rest of it if you need to.
I think we've seen some leveling off on some of the construction costs, hopefully for this project and the library project that will, hold at least through this year.
I think we had a similar All Diamonds where we went out for bid and the prices came much higher than we were expecting. We took a break, we came back, we rebid it, and the prices were much more reasonable the second time around. So, we always have the opportunity to say, those prices are more than we want to pay right now, let's kind of regroup and figure out what to do next, so.
I think those are odd situations, we've been through odd situations, so it's kind of odd even bringing it up, but sure.
I have to admit that I was very naive. I have driven past these buildings on a regular basis for 26 years and never paid them any attention. I kind of vaguely knew that something having to do with Parks and Rec happened in there. And went in a few months ago to make a little visit with the staff and had one of my kids attempted to move into an apartment in that condition, straight out of college, I would have put handcuffs on them and made them come home and live in my basement. It's ready. It needs to be done.
Anything further? Hearing none, roll call, Carla.
Rathe.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
Beaufore.
Yes.
Bergen.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Vote of 6-0 and 1 absent, resolution 23-28 is approved. Item 7, this is the date, time, and place for a public hearing on the proposition of the issuance of not to exceed $600,000 general obligation bonds of the City of Waverly, State of Iowa for general corporate purposes, GCP 3. Have we received any written or oral comments, Carla?
They have not, Your Honor.
Okay. Any public comments from anyone? Seeing nobody rise, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of Resolution 23-29, a resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed $600,000 general obligation bonds, GCP 3.
Second.
Motion by Rathe, second by Birgen. Council discussion, if any?
What's this for?
The Ivanhoe Trail Bridge.
Oh.
Hearing nothing further, roll call, Carla.
Schneider.
Yes.
Beaufore.
Yes.
Bergen.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Rathe.
Yes.
Vote of 6-0 and 1 absent. Resolution 23-29 is approved. Item 8, this is the date, time, and place for a public hearing on the proposition of the issuance of not to exceed $600,000 general obligation bonds of the City of Waverly, State of Iowa for general corporate purposes, GCP 4. Have you received any comments, Carl?
No, sir, Your Honor.
Any public comments from anybody that's joined us? Seeing nobody rise, we'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I will move approval of Resolution 23-30, a resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed $600,000 general obligation bonds, GCP 4.
Second.
Motion by Birgen, second by Meyers. Council discussion.
Just that this is for the public works storage and generators for use in emergencies.
Yes, ma'am. And I guess of the ones that we've had tonight, this is the one to me that is the harder one, because this is one that I could see pushing off for a year. The other ones I think are certainly the parks and the bridge needed to be replaced, and the library, you're doing it as a one as opposed to splitting it off and trying to do over this. This is one that, they're things that are gonna be nice to have, but they're not necessarily required immediate type things. And that's what makes it difficult for me. But knowing what we're doing with it, even though you don't like paying just interest, but the fact that we're not hitting anything else with it is enough for me. But it is a harder thought.
This is one of those where it could be harmless to put it off, but it could also be really bad to not put, I mean, to put it off. I mean, it's a sort of thing where we could find out in a very bad way that it was the wrong choice. So I mean, that's why it's like, yeah, we could probably put it off, but if it turns out that it was the wrong choice, then it would be really wrong. So, I mean, that's kind of the risk for me. Those generators, I think, are a huge safety, like, concern. I mean, like, just kind of backup infrastructure. So.
And if we didn't build the storage, how would that impact the parks situation? Because right now, Public Works is using some space at the parks maintenance area, correct?
Yep, that's correct. There's sand and salt storage over there. So, I mean, the idea the whole time has been that everything would be shifted out to public services. We have ideas for things that we'll be storing there after that's gone. We'll have our own salt supply, our own sand supply, dirt that we need, those kind of things. And rock and, you know, so on, our own kind of stuff that we need over there at the Parks building. But, yeah, I guess that's the easiest answer I can give.
Thanks.
And the generator's like not buying the trip insurance and then.
Exactly.
You gotta put no luggage. Or worse.
Yeah, I do think the generators are critical, especially considering what some of the stuff we've been seeing. It's ridiculous. Yeah, I'll vote yes on it, but if we could separate those, I'd rather see that, but.
All right. Hearing nothing further, roll call, Carla.
Beaufore.
Yes.
Birgen.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Rathe.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
A vote of 6-0 and 1 absent, resolution 23-30 is approved. Brings us to section G, public comments for items not on the agenda. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes unless additional time is granted by the presiding officer. All remarks shall be addressed to the council as a whole and not to any individual member. Any public comments this evening from anyone that's joined us? Seeing nobody rise, we'll move to section H, the consent calendar. Following items will be acted upon by a voice vote on a single motion without separate discussion unless someone from the council or public requested a specific item be considered separately. Item 1 is a pay request to Stege Construction Incorporated for the Parks Maintenance Building Remodel Project in the amount of $23,449.90. Item 2 is a pay request to Modern Design for the Parks Maintenance Building Project in the amount of $344. Item 3 is a pay request to Stege Construction Incorporated for the Cedar River Park Baseball Softball Development, Phase 3, bid package number 2 in the amount of $43,790.76. Item 4 is a pay request to Grider Construction Incorporated for WPC Facility Improvements 2020 in the amount of $242,440. Item 5 is a Class C retail alcohol license for Waverly Municipal Golf Course. Item 6 is a Class E retail alcohol license for liquor and tobacco outlet. Item 7 is a Class C retail alcohol license for Tapatio Mexican Grill. Entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar as read by the mayor.
Second.
Motion by Schneider, second by Birgen. Council discussion, if any. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Consent calendar is approved. Under regular business item number 1, resolution 23-31, a resolution authorizing the issuance of $4,500,000 of general obligation bonds, series 2023, and levying a tax for the payment thereof. Entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of Resolution 23-31, a resolution authorizing the issuance of $4.5 million general obligation bond, Series 2023, and levying a tax for the payment thereof.
Second.
Motion by Rathe, second by Birgen. Council discussion. Hearing none, roll call, Carla.
Birgen.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Rathe.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
Beaufore.
Yes.
Vote of 6-0 and 1 absent, resolution 23-31 is approved. Item 2 is resolution 23-32, accepting the bike and pedestrian trail plan and park and open space plan, including a master plan for Memorial Park. Entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of Resolution 23-32, accepting the bike and pedestrian trail plan and park and open space plan, including a master plan for Memorial Park.
Second.
Motion by Birgen, second by Meyers. Council discussion, if any?
One question I had, if we're accepting a master plan for Memorial Park, there were, in the final document, there were 2 drawings for Memorial Park. And so I'm not sure what we're accepting. You know, are we accepting those as potential blueprints for the park that we will then consider and perhaps tweak in the future? Or do we need to pick one of them? They're draft designs. And so I just wasn't sure how to interpret.
I think they're just that draft of what could be a layout, a couple different options.
Okay.
I don't think it's locked in stone by any
Okay.
means, just an option of what it could look like based on the information that MSA collected, what they looked at. You have a couple versions of what it could be. But as you know, we're gonna be digging into this. I've recruited Bill to assist as well. He's all excited about it. You can sell it that it's gonna take a long time to sift through this, figure out process, procedure, referendums, timing, cost, layering of bills to get this ready to go. And that may impact what you're seeing and how it progresses depending on what comes in under, over, et cetera. So I think it's a good draft, but I don't think it's locked in stone by any means. It's gonna be more of an evolution of what you're gonna look at as a council.
Mind if I invite Kristen to come up if she has a 1 minute, what the intent was that as we take ownership of these?
Absolutely, sir.
Yep, so just to clarify, earlier in the report, there are 2 different concepts that it shows for Memorial Park Master Plan, and then within the recommendations section, there is one final, more refined version of the Park Master.
That's the one on page 80.
Yes, yep. So once again, it's not final by any means, but this is kind of the revised concept that we came up based on all the input that we received.
Basically identifying what the needs or the wish list was and kind of putting it in a
Correct.
space.
Okay, right.
It could be completely different, but it articulates all the things that were
Gotcha.
desired. Is that fair
Absolutely,
statement?
yep.
Okay.
Well, and I think there's value in showing the process of these are the things that we considered before this is what we ended up with.
Right.
So,
Yep,
Visual aid versus a simple list.
yep.
So, okay.
And I know we talked about these timeframes. I mean, they're going to have to be fluid. You know, it doesn't mean it's not a great plan. It's still a great plan, but I don't see us paving, you know, some of these gravels in the parkways, for example, in the timeframe mentioned. That doesn't mean they'll never get done. In fact, I think, you know, in 50 years, I don't know where you'll all be, I'll be 97, and I'll look back and we'll say, yeah, when a long, long time ago, we actually used to have gravel in our parking lots, and they'll all be paved. So it's difficult to know. We'll be able to swallow some of those things, but I know it'll happen, and it doesn't, you know, it makes the plan actually more valuable when dollars are more difficult to sort through. So it's something that we definitely needed, so.
Yep, absolutely. It's a range, and then this is essentially a guide, so just a guiding document.
Great. Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you.
Anything further? Hearing none, roll call, Carla.
Kangas.
Yes.
Meyers.
Yes.
Rathe.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
Beaufore.
Yes.
Bergen.
yes.
Vote of 6-0 and 1 absent, resolution 23-32 is approved. Item number 3 is the second reading of ordinance 1116, amending sewer rates, charges, and minimum rates, and setting a public hearing. Entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of the second reading of ordinance 1116, amending sewer rates, charges, and minimum rates, and setting March 6, 2023 at 7 PM in the council chambers of City Hall as the date, time, and place for a public hearing.
Second,
Motion by Meyers, second by Birgen. Council discussion. Hearing none, roll call, Carla.
Kangas.
Yes.
Meyers.
Yes.
Rathe.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
Beaufore.
Yes.
Bergen.
yes.
The vote of 6-0 and 1 absent, the second reading of ordinance 1116 is approved. Item 4 is the second reading of ordinance 1117, amending the water rates and minimum charges for water usage and setting a public hearing.
I'll move approval of the second reading of Ordinance 1117, amending the water rates and minimum charges for water usage and setting March 6th, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of City Hall as the date, time, and place for a public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Rathe, second by Birgen. Council discussion.
Just a question for Justin on some of the increases we've seen in costs. Where has the bulk of that been, or maybe some of the more glaring things that you've seen?
Some of the biggest costs are their cost of steel, all their water main repair parts, valves. I've seen a probably 60% increase in valve prices since when I first, it was about 3 years ago, last time we bought a bulk of them. Electricity costs, those are going up 3% this year. Pretty much chemical costs have leveled out a little bit. We saw a big spike in these last 2 years, but they've leveled a little bit out, but that's where the majority of it.
Okay. 3% seems to be commendable in this environment, so I was just wondering how that shook out.
Anything further? Roll call, Carla.
Myers.
Yes.
Rathe.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
Beaufore. Yes. Birgen.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
Vote is 6-0 and 1 absent. The second reading of ordinance 1117 is approved. Item 5, the second reading of ordinance 1118, amending solid waste rates, charges, and minimum rates for fiscal year 2023-2024 and setting a public hearing. Entertain motion.
I will approve the second reading, or I move approval of the second reading of ordinance 1118, amending solid waste rates, charges, and minimum rates for fiscal year 2023-2024, and setting March 6th, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of City Hall as the date, time, and place for a public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Birgen, second by Rathe. Council discussion. As we get our styrofoam bin back, be good. Here's nothing further. Roll call, Carla.
Rathe.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
Beaufore.
Yes.
Bergen.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Vote is 6-0 and 1 absent. The second reading and setting of the public hearing is approved on ordinance 1118. Item 6 is the second reading of ordinance 1119, control devices or measures on streets in Waverly.
I would move approval of the second reading of ordinance 1119, adding and removing certain traffic control devices or measures on streets in Waverly.
Second.
Motion by Kangas, second by Schneider. Council discussion.
This is not adding traffic cams.
Thank you. Anybody else want to say that again?
Thank you.
Roll call, Carla.
Schneider.
Yes.
Beaufort.
Yes.
Bergen.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Rathe.
Yes.
Vote is 6-0 and 1 absent. The second reading of ordinance 1119 is approved. Item 7 is the first reading of ordinance 1121, amending chapter 100 zoning of the Waverly City Code by amending section 100.28 and setting a public hearing.
I'll move to approve first reading of ordinance 1121, amending chapter 100 zoning of the Waverly City Code by amending section 100.28 and setting March 6, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of City Hall as the date, time, and place for a public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Schneider, second by Kangas. Council discussion. Hearing none. Roll call, Carla.
Beaufort.
Yes.
Bergen.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Rathe.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
Vote of 6-0 and 1 absent. The first reading of ordinance 1121 is approved and the public hearing is set. Item 8 is the review of the fiscal year 2022 City of Waverly audit from Williams & Company PC by City Administrator James Garner.
Thank you, sir. Normally, we would have Williams and Company come here, but since it's a 9-hour drive round trip, I didn't think it was worth it to have them come here for 10, 15 minutes or more, and we would probably have to pay for that anyway, so. So this is my 26th audit I've been through in different forms from county, city, and schools, and so I think I will handle this going through for you. We'll talk about a couple key things. I've made my notes. I've talked to Chad about what he would want to present. I don't know if I'm going to present that or not, but we're going to get through this. So Chad would tell us to start on page 6. Look at page 6. There's our beautiful award for our excellence in financial reporting We pretty much receive this every year. The confusion some people have is this does not mean anything about what our numbers are. It's the process and how we do our audit. It's the process and how we do our bookkeeping. It's what we do to make sure that everything is done correctly. And that is why we receive this award each and every year, and I'm sure we'll receive it again the next year. Page 8. We'll go through this as quick or as slow as you want to. The independent auditor's report is a clean opinion. You would hear him say that every year. That's what you want it to be. There were no discretionary things that he could not determine or any problems they had going through the process. Staff is outstanding in providing the information they needed for it to get this done. It just took a little longer than usual. There was a lot of GASB items that we'll touch on a little later that we had to get done this year. They keep coming and coming every single year, and we'll kind of, like I said, touch on it a little later, but this is a clean audit opinion, which is the highest level that you can get. So that is the purpose of this area.
Don't mean to interrupt you, James, but a quick clarification. When we had that issue that you explained during the budget with GASB, that's not reflective of this audit, right? Is that our current year, or is that?
Which issue? There's a whole bunch of them.
Well, the issue where we had to bond for general fund items and
The cash on hand.
the cash on hand and.
Our fund balance.
Yes, our fund balance.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
I tend to go through that thoroughly, so everyone can understand exactly where this is at. There's a lot of confusion surrounding that. We're gonna make it crystal clear.
So I didn't see that in here, that's why I thought.
No,
What am I
not at
missing
all.
here, so, okay.
I'll show you where it's at.
Okay.
It's not pretty. Page 11 is the start of management's discussion and analysis. They assist us in writing this. It's kind of a lot of good information if you want to read through it. It kind of gives you an overall view of where the city's finances actually do sit. So again, if you really want to get a summary of this entire 200-page document, that is a good place to go with it and compare it to past years and kind of see the ups and downs of where we are. So we'll shift through that and we'll go to page 24. And this is where we'll start to get into some of the ugly. So there's a lot of discussion among the public and a lot of people that, you know, the experts online come out and we do our budget and our audit, and there's just a lot of misconception about what did happen with our audit. So if you look at the left side general fund, this is, and I want to stress too, this is not a cash audit, money in the bank, things like that. This is a accrual audit. So if you have bills that are due in June and don't reach us until July, August, etc., those are still being pulled back into this audit. It's truly an accrual audit. Someday, and Val and I have talked about this, will we continue to do an accrual audit? I don't know. I'm wondering, are we getting the benefit we need out of it? It is more expensive. Can we do a straight cash audit? It's less expensive. I think it accomplishes the same thing. We're one of the few cities our size that do a true comprehensive annual financial report. And I like the possibility that we can compare this to any city in the country that does the same thing for cities. It's the same format, same everything.
So we could do a cash audit
Yeah.
legally?
Sure could. And so that's something we will consider probably next year as we kind of look at some of the impact of the decisions that we're getting into for our financials and what they're going to cost us. But regardless, if you look down towards the bottom, you'll see $829,370. Those are library community funds. That's kind of the crux of what started our audit issue, so to speak. And it says above that, if you look at it, it's restricted. We can't spend on it anything but library community funds. So in 2020, if you were to look back at the audit in the same section, your governmental fund section, you would see no restriction there for the library funds. It's nice and clean, there's nothing there. It is truly in our unassigned funds. The logic at the time was that's where it should sit. It's a general fund item, it's part of the library, it's where it should go. I understand it. In 21, they pulled that out. That piece of it at least was in there. So if you look at 21, you'll see $1,215,000 just like this pulled out and restricted. We never had the intent of spending that fund anyway because again, it's for just the library. So we understand that. We focus on the unassigned fund balance. If you look from one year to the next, our unassigned fund balance is down about 1.4 million. That's kind of what we talked about during budget, et cetera. A lot of that revolves around ball diamonds and when we built them and how they are categorized in an audit itself. Not being a CPA, I get the gist of it. Chad explains it. I'm trying to be a lot more clear than Chad was. So some of the things that we look at, when you look at the reduction of that, is whenever we have our audit, we look at how much fund balance we carry as a percent of expenditures. And again, it's gonna take a little time, but I wanna make sure this is crystal clear to everybody. The past couple of years, we've been at 58 and 60% of fund balance for 20 and 21, which is a lot. And I don't think it's responsible for us to carry that heavy a fund balance and still continue to increase taxes and go forward. So what we have done every year is we look at where does that take us, how much money would get us down to 30%, 25 to 30, which is the range we want to be in. And then we would burn that down with capital projects, things that we had to do, things that we could do, things that we normally would continue to do. When the audit changed, so when fiscal 23 was built, we did not have fiscal 22 actuals, but we knew about where it was going to be. There wasn't much change. Fiscal 21 was at almost 60%. Turned out 21 itself, after 20 was 58 or 60%. We thought we're going to be similar. We're going to be in good shape with this audit. And so we continue to expect $500,000-$600,000 to burn down our capital so we're not taxing too much. Then we got a hold of the auditors this year and remove the ball diamond funds that we'd accumulated. $450,000 were pledges, which you cannot leave in the fund balance. That had to be removed. That was a little bit of a hit. Another $360,000 was actual cash we had on hand in there. It's got to be removed. And there was still $165,000 in like library investments for the foundation, which had to be removed. That was $1 million that had to come out of the fund balance that had previously been left in there. This is determined by the auditors. We don't decide any of this. We have state forms that we have to follow that dictate where our money goes, where we use it, how we budget, how we enter it, how we audit it. And so when they audit these different funds, they will determine are things allowed to still be in there or not. So just before I started here at the county or the city, when I was at the county, we were on GASB 75, 77, something like that. We just finished GASB 87 for this budget, and 101 is what we'll be dealing with next year. That's how fast these things come out from the Government Accounting Standards Board. That's GASB, GASB. And they're constantly changing rules, changing allocation, changing how you take and look at your funds, what you can and can't do. So again, we're looking at GASB 101 next year is something we'll have to deal with that audit. So as these things evolve, there's a lot of discussion, interpretation, what should not be allowed to sit in certain areas of your audit. All the money that we had a year ago is still in the same audit. It's just in a different fund that we cannot access easily anymore. And that was the determination that allowed our fund balance to depreciate like it did. So financially, we are fine. My biggest contention was the timing of it, 4 days before we were coming to you for budget on January 28th, and the communication, which we didn't have with our auditors until we actually called to challenge this and see what it was. What they did is not wrong. It's just, it would have been nice to have had some kind of insight ahead of time. This was gonna happen, so we weren't 7 months through the current year without any way to really start to restrict and pull this back, remove items, and try and shore up our fund balance a little more than it was. Now, we're probably gonna be at 12, 13%. Is that acceptable? Absolutely. There are cities with far less than that and have been for many, many years. But just because it's the minimum required doesn't mean it's something I'm happy with. You know, we try to push staff to be excellent, to move forward when our financials look that way. And that's just how I've done things in the past going forward, so I'm not happy with it. We had the amount we needed, 25, 30%. Now we don't. Are we fine? We are. It'll still be over $1 million in the fund balance at the end of fiscal 24 if everything goes as bad as we have predicted. So we're absolutely fine. I just don't like it. I want more in there. I want to challenge us to look for more, to turn more money into that fund balance so we can take a little bigger hit than what we may or may not do. And with a lot of the activity at State House right now, multiple bills going through that are going to curb our ability to grow, curb the ability for our revenue to increase. The redoing of the residential rollback did go through. It's a $120,000 hit we're going to take as soon as it's signed. I'll be working on that when they send that out. So these are the things that I worry more about is the legislation coming from the State House than us taking a hit for a variety of different things. And the other two study bills are coming into committee. They too may go through, limiting, again, our growth, our local option sales tax will maybe be removed, and et cetera, all the things that we've talked about. So as you walk through this, again, there were certain items that we just no longer could consider part of our general fund. We've always focused on the unassigned, which is the money that's there to be spent on whatever you need to be, not the restricted. So there is no money missing, there's no money gone, in which people would stop saying such things. It's all right here, it's always been right here. If you go to the bank, let's go to First Bank, check our funds, it's the same amount that was in there a year ago, it's still sitting there, nobody took it, hasn't been robbed, we didn't secretly spend it. It's, some of the stuff, the conspiracies that come up, they're just ridiculous. But the bottom line is, we have a little less fund balance than we wanted. You know, we had a checking savings account, let's say, they moved our checking into our savings, now we can't touch it as easy. And that's the gist of what happened with the audit. So, end of the world, far from it. I'm just greedy and I want more money in our fund balance. It makes us stronger, it makes us on a path going forward that we were in great shape going, and it just, we had to restep. But we will come back to that in the next year or two, we'll get it back.
So just to
They'll figure
clarify,
it out.
is this as a result of new GASB regulations? or
Interpretations of them.
Interpretations?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So was there a lapse of time where it should have been interpreted differently, or is it, and I understand it's like with new tax laws.
Right.
The CPA, sometimes they take time to chew it and digest it, and.
I think that's kind of where we were.
Is that kind of the same sort of deal?
Because in
where-
fiscal 21, they partially did that with the library, but we still hadn't done it with ball diamonds, which eventually we did with ball diamonds as well. And so once that started, they determined that should be similar. That's how it kind of went. Some of it was discussion with the Community Foundation as well. It was almost like a reimbursable grant. It's their money until we apply a bill and get it back. So it wasn't actually our funding until we asked for it. And that's where the determination came that maybe it needs to be removed from our funds to be accessible, even if they were a general fund or not, because they were holding the funding for us. So until we apply for it, until the library is able to spend it, in theory, according to the accounting standards, well, then it's not technically ours yet. So it's a thin line, again, not a cash audit, it's an accrual audit, as Matt and I have talked in the past. They're different. It is just nasty. It's not simply going to the bank and saying, here's how much cash we have. We do that too, but because we won our award and we like the way this looks, we do the accrual side of it, which is a lot messier. It just is a lot more difficult to get through. So hopefully that's clear-ish. I mean, is that any questions from any of you at all? So at least we have some understanding of where we're at.
Would a cash audit be less expensive?
Yes, that's why we're thinking about it.
What's our current contract? Didn't we sign a new 3-year contract with them?
We signed an extension. We were pushed for many years to go out and rebid it, and we did. And we had one bidder, and that was these guys who are currently doing it. And it was $30,000 more than we were doing the last time. Because that's what happens when you bid it. The only bidder you get, that's the one you've got. And we didn't have a lot of choice because they were it. And so that's what we're looking at. So we would want to go out and possibly look at our contract, see how long it is, could we rebid it in a sense, look at our cash audits, and possibly go that route. I'm gonna try and talk to some other cities our size, see what they've done. In fact, I want to find another city Williams and Company does that is on a cash audit, see what is the real difference in what we're getting and not getting. I know the stuff we'll get into later, statistical section, a lot of great information in there that you would not have in a cash audit. So you do lose a little bit of that in a sense. The MD&A letter is not in a cash audit most of the time. So it's kind of whatever you want to get out of it in a sense. So with that, Chad would tell us we should go to page 27. So we're going to jump to page 27. If you look down at the bottom of that, on the left side, you see prior period adjustment. That is where those funds are removed. So this is where they kind of partially went. The far right, other governmental funds, you see $363,000. That was the ball diamond money that was moved into that fund as cash going in versus. So that again is some of the offsetting entries that you see when you start to dig into what this actually is. The next section is the notes to financials. Again, a lot of great reading in here if you want to understand where our debt sits, what all our issues are, etc. It's in the financial notes. Why we do the accounting we do, what the government-wide is, it's in the financial notes. There's a ton of great information here if you like that kind of stuff. But I think it generates as many questions as it does actual answers too. So GASB 87, that's the last one that we did. That was on leases. And so there's a new way you have to certify and look at leases. Well, we have about $39,000 in leases, and that $39,000 probably cost us an extra $10,000 to have this audited because of GASB 87. So it's not just the fact it causes more work, it causes more expense too. Because there's certain things they have to do, it's more time spent. I'm just glad this wasn't a single audit this year, which is when you have over $500,000 in federal funding that's been expended. Thankfully, we didn't have that, or that would have been even more on top of it. That each program that has that amount of money has to also be audited. We'll probably have it next year because our ARPA funds will have been expended on our sewer projects. We'll have to identify that, spend it. They'll have to do additional auditing for that. So we will have a single audit next year, guaranteed. So if you get through the notes and you want to look a little deeper, you can go to page 81. I know it's a big jump. There's a lot of notes in there. So page 81 gives us the budget to actual. You can kind of look through and see we did not have a finding this year. We did not run over budget anywhere. We amended as we needed to in time, and so everything checked out very nicely. So well done, staff. We identified everything. It was done well. The last major section I'll get into, because if you go through the rest of that, up to the statistical section, you're getting into each individual capital project. You're getting into water, sewer, enterprise fund projects. It's all the exact same audited items. It's just for each different fund. And we have 30, 40 capital projects that go through, and again, it just identifies money in, money out, assets, liabilities, and how we ended up. And this all ties out the reports that Val runs for us. So statistical section is, again, that is a great 10-year reflection of a lot of different areas, what you see in the city. Put a lot of time into this to make sure it goes, but again, 10 years of what's happened, how we look, you see the trends up, down, our fund balances, how they've been. Again, prior to fiscal 20, everything was included in them, then we split them out a little further in the last 2 years. And so that's what you're gonna see if you go through, whether it's the net revenue we've had, it's the, again, the fund balance we've looked at. We usually have our top, our assessed values, how they've gone, a breakout of our tax rates, where they all have gone, our top principal taxpayers in the community, our total levies. There's just a lot of information here I think is good to look through and just kind of get familiar with yourself. Then the last piece we'll jump on is the one everybody likes to talk about, our findings. So on page 145, we have our normal finding. During the audit, we identified material amounts of receivables, payables, et cetera, et cetera. Chad was here, he could tell you that is in almost every audit they do. 99 have them, the last one was lucky, they didn't find it, but it's there. So anytime they have to make any change to any journal, to anything, you're gonna receive this. And when you look at all the GASB changes, we follow it this year, they change it next year, we receive this. So I'm very pleased, this is the only finding that we have. It's something we will have every single year. If it isn't there, it means we were perfect, and I don't think we need auditors if that was the case, which would save us a little bit of money. So Val, we have to do better. We have to get perfect, stop having audits.
Is there a percentage on that, like a percentage of weakness where before they, you know, because if you're off $1, they're not going to stamp it as a material weakness.
Shouldn't. I don't know what his materiality is that, I can sure find that out for you.
That would be interesting.
It's a little bit, it's not as much as you think it'd be, because any change you have to make, whether it's reclassifying funds, which, thank you today, that causes it.
Yeah.
And again, it was in response to an interpretation they've been debating on for the last 2 or 3 years. We've been talking about it for a couple of years now. They put a lot of effort into investigating it, and then they decided this year, yes, we should probably move it.
That's why I wonder if it's even attainable to get it.
It's
I mean,
probably not. Because again, any change at all, it has to be done. And there's always adjusting entries at the end. That's what they do. They're gonna find something, they're auditors, that's what you're here for. But I will certainly check on his dollar amount for his materiality. So that is what Chad would have said. I think I've done him justice, and that's what we would have walking through the audit. I don't know if you have questions, comments, anything you want to see or know. I mean, take a read. You can always contact me later with it, but I will reiterate again, we are in sound financial shape, just like we were before. Nothing went any different. The same money's here. It's in a different account, one that we can't access readily. So we will work to get back to where we were over the next couple of years and get to where I want us to be. Not where we legally have to be, that's much less, but where we should be, because I think we're better than it.
So I have a question, and I don't know, this may be for someone with the library. So we have that, you said $800,000 restricted library fund. I know that they're spending some of their endowment for this project. I believe it's another $700,000. Is that kind of where that $700,000 is coming from? Is that 800?
You will see that reduction then when that is expended, and that money would no longer be available for next year. So if it's all completely expended, you would not see any figure there in the audit for fiscal '23. So you will see that reduce when you look at that general fund or fund balance sheet.
So once the project is completed, we would expect to see that number smaller.
Yep. And even the ball diamonds that would have completely went away, they were just trying to capture it in the meantime when it hadn't, because of receivables, cash on hand, pledges. It's all where they shifted. And again, this is not my forte, but this is why we pay these individuals, third party coming in to do what they do and make sure that we're doing things correctly, so.
Well, hats off, we're doing a nice job managing debt, and we are financially secure. And just to reiterate my point, so it doesn't get confused, that my concern is mostly this inflation. You know, when we're at 7.5%, that means stuff's doubling at the end of those bonds. What's the likelihood of that being sustainable? Who knows? That's in the Fed's hands, but they seem crazy right now. And until we can disconnect from them, which I'm confident will happen, then it'll be a great day. Then we will get all those paved parking, everything's gonna be, we'll zip right through that park plan.
And the good thing is, because I respect your comments completely, when we go in and assess our bonds and borrow for this, we are bidding and knocking everything out in the next year to 18 months. So we're not seeing that 6 and 7 years out, having those increases on what we needed the bonds for. So we're trying to get them done quickly so we don't experience the inflation and the losses that we could have had if we'd have bid them earlier. So we'll get through that part, our debt will stay the same, but future projects I think will be difficult going forward. When we talk about the pool and everything else we're trying to do, that's where Bill and I are gonna have a good time with this, is what do you predict? What do you look at? What is inflation gonna be? How much money is that really gonna feel like in 5 years? Is it 80% of what we did have? How do you get through that? And that's where we'll get into referendums and timing and everything else. So, so yeah, we'll start undoing that project probably this week and get a plan together. But as far as audit, that's what we have. Like I said, we'll look into, do we continue to do this version of it? Maybe we get through this contract and we stop. We'll kind of try to get the good and bad of it with other cities that are currently doing our size and see what the benefits are and come back to you with that. So, any other questions, anything, audit? Got a lively public yet out there for us? They'll stayed for that? God, I'd have left and started. I wouldn't have stayed for that.
Ross isn't snoring, so we're good.
I think it's important for the public to know that if they have questions or concerns, they can bring them to us or to you.
Sure, always.
And that's really the thing to do.
I'd rather have them understand what's going on instead of drawing their own conclusions and going off on something that isn't. As we said, our libraries have an educated society, and let's continue to work for that. This is another way to do it. That's why we're here, is to explain these situations, point out where we are and aren't, and hopefully people understand that. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Moving to item number 9, the approval of the mayoral appointments. Seek a motion to approve the appointment of Linda Appmeyer and Stephanie Ross to be reappointed to the Human Equity and Diversity Commission for terms expiring February 15th of 2025. Entertain a motion.
Move approval of the mayoral appointments as read by the mayor.
Second.
Motion by Kangas, second by Birgen. Council discussion, if any. The only thing I'll say is there's 2 remaining openings on that commission, so, pardon me?
You need to meet gender balance.
Correct.
So
that's our
male applications.
ever lengthy consideration.
And that's one that the legislature's actually looking at changing.
Yeah.
For now.
That'd be nice.
To what?
They're removing the gender balance requirement because smaller communities are having trouble to
Yeah.
Make that.
Even with the variance that is allowed after X period of time that you can still, because we've had some of those commissions where we've waited 90 days or more than the minimum to try to get interest, and it just doesn't.
But doesn't it say that if you can't find applicants, you can
Yeah.
be
It's I think it's
imbalanced? So why do they
minimum of
need to,
60 days it has to basically be vacant.
so why do they need a piece of legislation?
So,
Same reason they need to take our local option sales tax. Well, we'll never know.
Yeah. I'm glad the women's right to vote is in the federal constitution.
So, nothing further, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same side. Motion carries. Item 10 is Resolution 23-33, a preliminary resolution for the construction of public sidewalks on infill lots meeting the criteria in Council Resolution 2121.
I'll move approval of Resolution 23-33, a preliminary resolution for the construction of public sidewalks on infill lots meeting the criteria in Council Resolution 21-21.
Second.
Motion by Rathe, second by Meyers. Council discussion.
So I have a question, and I may regret asking this. When we're looking at the High Point Second Edition, so I'm looking on page 12, we have 1051 and 1055 on Second Avenue Northeast. So when we have 3 adjacent lots, they are not required to put in the sidewalk, but when we have 2, they are. And it looks like there are 2 lots and something labeled OK. And I'm curious why those 2 lots aren't exempt.
It says okay because there's a house that's been built on there.
Yeah.
So basically saying that the picture is not current.
Right.
That there is a sidewalk there, it's just not on this map. Or on this picture.
In a home. Unfortunately, we don't have real-time.
Thank you for answering my question.
Chinese for their building pictures. We need to ask the Chinese for their building pictures.
I see.
Real time.
So can I start us off?
Yes.
This will be easier. I think what we have to start with is, when we're doing a sidewalk infill, back in '21, I think the assumption and some of our ordinances indicated that if you wanted to do an infill program, you could do it using the code section that allows you to do repairs and maintenance. And that's a simple process that takes a 30-day notice, and then you can do it, and then you can assess it. So when we changed that, when we realized that we had done that, or that this is what had happened, and others were doing this too, by the way, and we weren't the first city to discover that we were using the wrong section for something. And when they finally figured it out, then there was a lot of chatter with the municipal attorneys because we had to figure out what we had to change eventually. But under infill, it's not considered to be qualified for that section. That just requires repair and maintenance and replacement. Because if you have a sidewalk that has to be replaced and redone, that's different than if it's never been built before. So when you do have one that's not been built before, you have to use the process which is more like a city project, where you do assessments and where you give the homeowners an opportunity to contest valuations and the public benefit versus the private benefit. So what we've started here is that new procedure, which is much more like the water, sewer assessments that we've done in the past, where we tell you what we're doing and who benefits from it. Sidewalks are a little different because in 2011, there was a Supreme Court decision, I think it was 2011, that basically kind of upset the cart a little bit, which meant just because you're putting in a sidewalk in front of somebody's house that wasn't there before, you can't assess the 100% to that particular landowner. They didn't give us a lot of great guidance on the comparison between public benefit and private benefit, or the benefit of the owner. But it was still, you couldn't just give it all to them automatically. So what we looked at is the circumstances in which the infills are coming up and what was the intent to be done. And we have circumstances in this project that are various types of situations. So the easiest one is somebody's built a house and they didn't put their sidewalk in. That one's easy. We can do that, and it's 100% benefit probably to the property owner because they're required to do it under the subdivision ordinance. The next category would be lots that are still owned by the original developer, and they haven't been able to build on that or haven't been able to sell them for development within the years that we set in the resolution 2121, which we said if they're there for 6 years and they haven't build a house on it, we're gonna go ahead and make them build a sidewalk anyway. That's not what, that's not the accepted way of doing the valuation type allocation, so the benefit allocation. But it is stronger than not having anything, because there is still a subdivision ordinance that says that the owner has to put the sidewalks in when they build a house. So when you come to the conflict between what we want to do is get sidewalks filled in so people can walk on them even if the houses aren't there, and the fact that we want builders to be, or developers to be able to sell lots when they can, and if they can, and if they can't, we don't want to make it more difficult by having a sidewalk that doesn't provide as much benefit because there's no house there, and it may have to be removed partially or totally if you're going to build something on it. So that's a different situation. And then you have the infills in places where the subdivisions were done prior to 1980, which just kind of lets us say, well, what if we're going to start going into neighborhoods that never had sidewalks, and we're going to start assessing those, or trying to assess those sidewalk infills. Again, that would be an interesting thing. The one Supreme Court case was not quite like the middle of the city where we didn't have sidewalks before, but it was more of a rural area that there was an extension of a road, and nobody used it much, and it was a gravel road until somebody built a house or built a school out there, and suddenly they wanted to put curb and gutter and sidewalks on both sides of the highway, and they tried to assess the increase in the street improvements and the full sidewalk to the adjoining landowners. The Supreme Court said that's not quite right because that's a mixed benefit. There's a benefit to having the sidewalk go to the schools, not necessarily the benefit of the people that totally that were there. So it's put us in a little bit of confusion to say, how do we do infill then? We really want to have you look at the infill criteria lots that would show up under what you passed in 2121. Because that way you can see which ones are starting to be of concern that, we'd like to get these done. Why aren't they getting done? Why should we be pushing them to be done now? And I think that's why we have different situations in these lists. There's a couple of properties where people have two lots and they haven't completed the sidewalk all the way around those two lots. Those are the High Point properties where they're not for sale and they're basically using them as an extended lot. We have some of those in other areas that are smaller that people have actually put their sidewalks in over the years when they just made those. If you have two lots that are 100 foot each and then there's 100 foot frontage, it's a little different than when you have some of these longer versions of these bigger lots. So it makes it look different, but it's the same situation. And we usually require those to be done by folks that have the adjoining lot with a house. And those have been pretty good. We've gotten pretty good cooperation when we've asked them to do that. And that would be the next step on some of those that are included on the list that are that way. We would say, this is what we do for others, and we'd like to have you do it now as a part of this infill. There's one that is up in Country Meadow, which was an outlot in a subdivision that was done in the late 70s and is the only gap on Country Meadows Drive. But it's also 310 feet? Wide. And that's one of those where it may be at some point when we want to do it as a city to spend the money, we'd allocate what part should be reasonably done for the person who has that frontage, maybe 100 foot of it, and then the rest of it would be the city's part of it. I don't know if that's even fair either, because you could actually put lots in there too. So I mean, it's usually and I think there was one in that case that had somebody that had a 300 foot lot, and their house was basically in front of 100 foot of it, and that's kind of how they basically said they could assess it against those other two lots eventually, but it wasn't the same cost as where the house was. So what happens is, the next step of this process is if you prove the original schedule that we've done, And we'll go back to the schedule because there's some decisions you need to make about the way you want that schedule to look for the preliminary resolution. Get ahead of myself. So we just want to look at.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So based on what you said about the court cases and the interpretation of the code, that was my question, is it sounds like we probably need to make some changes or do we need to make some changes in the resolution from 21?
So what we could, and that's another question of how we do that, because I think we would just say we have to use this procedure if we want to assess lots. And what that means is you're not going to get a guaranteed 100% of your cost back, because this involves a valuing process, a public benefit and against private benefit process, which may mean those numbers would change. And what I was basically saying is that now, for now, what you say is maybe the preliminary assessments need to be changed by identifying ones where you didn't want to do 100% assessed against the property owner. And you would adjust that if you wanted to do that, or if you could take them off and not do it at all if you didn't think you could assess 100%. I think the developer lots, I think there's 6 of them out of this list. Where's there 8 of them? 8. These involve lots in subdivisions where we have developers actually actively marketing their lots, because they do have signs up, they do take inquiries, that kind of thing.
Do you include those?
Yeah, those 4.
12.
Yes, so,
Because it's those 4, I'm counting these 2.
yep.
Prairie Park.
And then there's
And
4,
then these 6
6
here.
of those. So it's 12.
12.
Okay. My thought is, back in, was it 13, we took away the obligation of the developer to maintain a bond for a period of time in order to do the sidewalks if they were, and then that bond could be paid for, or could pay for the installation of the sidewalks. We changed that to basically saying that the ordinance says that when somebody builds a house, that's when they build the sidewalk. That's when they put the sidewalk in. So the infill is kind of inconsistent with, I mean, the infill criteria is a little bit inconsistent with that, because you can't use that other process to just assess it like a repair item. So with the developers, you know, if a developer's sitting on it and not doing anything with it, and there are a few owners that are not developers that are sitting on lots for a lot of years, and I think it's easier to see the 100% assessment towards the landowner that had a chance to build on that over 10 or 15 years, and there's a couple of those. I think those are easy ones to say we could assess those 100%, or at least try, at least make that effort to start with. And then the decision, so you need to decide basically how we treat these different aspects of the list of things that appear to qualify for 2121. So if you look at your assessment schedule, which is hard to read with these, like I said, the assessment for the developers, that's one category. I think they both fall in the same category. I don't think you're getting to the end of some of those, where some of those lots are being sold, but some of them are still there for sale. And in the last year or so, we've had, with the interest rate rise, we've kind of shut off development at this point. And maybe that's just kind of making it more difficult for them to move forward with that. Because then they'd have to raise their prices, because they're not supposed to pay for the sidewalk, so they'd have to charge more for the lot in order to get that back, since they would have to do it, or they would to make the same profit. I think there's the ones that have been there for quite a while and have not been, they're like there's one in Rolling Meadow, there's one lot left, and I think they've owned it for 15 years. There's one out in Monahan Edition, Rolling Hills, or there's 2, I think, out there, and that's where people have one's sort of an adjoining lot. It's a little more complicated because it's not just 2 lots together. They own a piece of the condominium regime next to them, but I think it was to protect their property. And then there's one that And there's one in High Point that is actually owned by a property owner. That wouldn't be a developer, but it would be it's in the same situation. They've only owned it for two years, I think, or 2 or 3 years, and haven't built on it. So those are kind of what we're dealing with. I had about 6 that were kind of easy calls for to try the 100%. And if you wanted to, the Country Meadows, I would say you'd have to either do a percentage of that, so that there'd be a percentage that would be the landowner's responsibility, and the rest would be the city's responsibility. And then the developer is an open question for me. I know what the hope was, that people are just holding back and they're not trying to sell them, but I think it really isn't true. I think they're maybe going fairly slow, but we haven't had a lot of, our numbers haven't been huge every year like it has been 10, 15 years ago, So that would be, so what I did is I changed the schedule a little bit, and I have a special benefit percentage. And it's the third from the right column that is assigned for each particular property that's listed. And I've inserted 100% to start with. And then the question would be is if you want to remove and defer some of them, you could. And if there's some you want to put a different percentage, and the special benefit is what the person would have to be assessed. The public benefit would be the rest of it that the city would pay. And if you didn't want to take a chance on any of it, you could pull those in and do it another year, if you thought there was ones that might go half and half or more. So again, it's more of a complicated decision making this, and we kind of wanted to have you see the ones that basically qualified, and then how it would be affected, how it would affect those different categories.
So are you asking us to make judgments on each of these?
Only if you really had to me, it's more on the deferments. If you were just to say, let's take these amounts off, or these particular properties off.
But it seems like we need to look at the previous resolution to make sure we still agree with it, based on, in part, on the comments you just made about a developer situation might be different than a homeowner who's sitting on a lot for 15 years. I mean, it feels like before we even talk, for me anyhow, it feels like before we even talk about what to assess people, we need to look at that resolution and make sure that we still agree with the components of it and they fit with what state law says.
Yeah, you can, I guess what we did was we just basically replaced your process by saying you can't use the 100% assessment after 30 days with the assessment that you can use to do these. And then what happens next, just so I can finish the process, and it may weigh in on what you think about this. Because if you take it to the next step, you have the hearing on the public hearing on the resolution of necessity. And if any one of those folks objected, then you'd have to basically consider what their objection is and what you think, and whether you would reduce that percentage. And if you did that, then the resolution of necessity would have to be adjusted to what you come up with as a final version. And then you have to approve the resolution of necessity by a 3/4 vote of the council, which means you have to have 6 votes out of 7. So if there's a thought that you're not going to have 6 votes out of 7 on particular things based on the fact that now it's required to do it, that you really have a 3/4 majority.
So that resolution that Dr. Rathe is referencing begins on page 7. However, what Bill has articulated is that the Supreme Court has nullified parts of this or changed how much of that actually sticks yet. Correct?
Yeah, and they didn't really change. I mean, folks have been doing this for a long time with some of this infill, but we kind of made it. We used it more aggressively than a lot of them do. A lot of cities aren't too concerned about infills because they happen over time.
So what, I think trying to make this simple, is how does that affect the the schedule that is here, that the schedule that is presented there, does anything have to change on it, or can it be moved forward the way it's written?
We can't use that, well, we have to use that to get them started towards this process, but you can try to assess anybody for a benefit that's gonna, that sidewalk that's gonna benefit a property owner.
So I don't have a vote, and I'm just trying to wrap around, okay, what is required to be changed?
Right, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
I don't think,
Because-
you don't have to change it, because what you can say is, this is when we want to start looking at a particular lot that needs a sidewalk.
But
And
I guess we might want to look at it, right? I mean, because basically there's, the scenarios you mentioned are, there's somebody who has built a home, have not put in their sidewalk, that's
Right,
pretty
that's an
simple.
easy one,
Second
right.
one is they have one lot that their home sits on, they have a second lot to expand their yard, or they're on a corner or whatever, and they haven't put in a sidewalk.
Right,
That seems
pretty
simple.
close to 100%.
Then you've got people who buy a lot, they sit on it forever, they're not building. They are covered by the resolution on page 7 there.
They
pretty
are,
much.
but that's not why you can do it under the section that the code section that we're using to assess. We're just doing it as a project, which means it's our criteria that we're looking at it after
Yes.
6 years.
So there's two separate issues. They're the criteria to make us look at it, and then there's how we would do it,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so if how we would do it has changed, does that need to be then inserted in this resolution? You wrote a separate thing that says, for that resolution, we're going to use this new procedure.
Well, yeah, because that's all we can do.
Right. So that's one of my questions
right.
is, you're having like an addendum document that would say, if you're going to enforce this, here's how you have to do it to
Right.
assess people fairly, blah, blah, blah. Then the other issue is the developers, right? So
Right.
on page 7, if you're a developer that's got 3 lots in a row that are vacant, then you're exempt. But what if your developer has 2 lots?
Well-
Where are they in the 2021 resolution? And I'm just curious,
Yeah,
so are they
but for
covered,
me-
or do we need to think about whether we want to say, okay, we don't want to discourage them selling these lots, we don't want to put in sidewalk and then have to rip it out when they build a house, so do we need to add different wording to your addendum, or do we?
I don't know, because the
start over?
question would be is if you took this through and tried it, and you found out, and you actually had the votes to pass the resolution of necessity over their objection, because they really have to object at the public hearing. That's the requirement, that they come forward and object.
The developer would,
Well, anybody
yeah.
that doesn't want to pay 100%.
Then they'd be given notice, and they can come to the public
Right,
hearing,
right.
and
And then they could then litigate that issue if they didn't agree with the percentage. And that's where you get the decision-making as to whether or not we've
Okay.
properly estimated the special benefit over the public benefit.
so you're saying that we, instead of putting some sort of language in the resolution, you would let the process happen, and then the council would vote whether or not to exempt them,
Except, yeah, and that would be.
based
either
on
you
whether it's
could-
public benefit versus private.
Either you could negotiate and you could figure out what you want to do for percentage, given that you know the situation and what might happen if there was a court case about it. We only have the one court case, and it's not exactly on point. That's the problem. And so it's really one of these, they've made it more difficult for the infill part. Because you have to really compare the private benefit over the public benefit.
Well, and I think this is very confusing. I think this resolution 23-34, I mean, I'm not even sure, I read it, but I think I need to digest it again, because I'm not really sure what we're,
Let me,
And by doing this, this is why we decided to have the discussion so we could show you what it would look like to
Yeah.
start with. And if you're uncomfortable with it and you want us to make some evaluation and some estimation about what the benefit might be, like if we said for these, we think it's 50/50, or we think, or, that kind of thing. Because you really can propose something and the court just decides, is that reasonable under the circumstances? And you should probably treat the similar situations similarly to
Yeah.
other situations that might be treated differently.
I guess I wish that it was on here as a discussion item without a vote.
right?
Well, we talked about whether we did that and whether we did it tonight. This is kind of what we're doing, and you can just not vote on it, and we'll table it for, we'll bring it back.
Yeah, that's our alternate, yeah.
It's hard to explain this without having the things in front of you to see, I think, in some respects.
And I know the hope with this, or the anticipation with this resolution having a result, is item number 11, setting a
Right.
public hearing for next month.
No, I understand that.
That, if we have an amendment to, or a suggestion how we want to do it, to table this until the first meeting in March.
Or we might
To
just bring.
postpone, sorry.
I would say, because we might change it instead of just postponing
That's-
the same document. I'm kind of hearing, questioning about the different categories
bringing it up, but I just think it's
situations.
confusing. I think this is confusing,
And
this document.
I had a hard time trying to figure out, because 2121 is legitimate to call it a criteria that you would then pursue, because you can pursue anything, even if you have, but the city might have to pay for 100% of it.
So presumptively, if we wanted to let this die on its own, to be able to bring it back in a new form, how do we, if that's
What do
what
other
people
people,
want
I
to do?
mean,
Yeah,
are
that's the
other people?
thoughts.
And that's what I'm kind of asking, because I really want to get
Glazed
feedback
over by
from
this
it.
point.
Because I
but-
think, I think I know what the intent here is, to have staff, which we've trusted on a lot of things, packaged together, these are your options, these are the benefits or not, a little bit more clearly, because I'm not saying I'm the smartest person in the room by any means, but I don't know what direction on this item.
Well, I think
It needs
how
to be
you
taken.
explained it, right?
Yeah.
That if you're going to do this, there's a new procedure that needs to be followed.
Right.
Right? And lay that out, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's just that when I read this, I didn't get that.
So what I'll tell you then is that how you allocate and how you estimate the special benefit then becomes a very important consideration, and it's kind of feeling your way along, because is it 100%, is it 50%, is it, it's kind of these things where, because the city could end up with a good percentage of the costs
Right.
if you went through this and changed, and they wanted you to change a lot of it, and you agreed to change a lot of it. Because again, you need to be almost unanimous when you do this vote, because it isn't how many people are here, it's 6 votes you have to have. So.
I think we need to table this,
Yeah,
sir.
I
We can
think-
do better than this as staff and bring you something. I don't like the way it's been laid out. Let us try again and bring something back
And
to
I
you.
honestly think it'd be good to have Councilperson Drenkow here and his opinion on this as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to
So-
categorize this better and explain what we were looking at and actually have a recommendation if you want and what we would like you to do. So
I think that
if
would be
you're
really
somehow to just
helpful.
table this, move it forward.
Yeah. I mean, these amounts, to be assessed are pretty significant.
It is. If we have to front the entire thing, it's over $100,000.
Yeah, so for us
we
and
don't
for
really
the
have.
citizens. So I think it'd be really helpful to see it just in different language that was,
Well, we'll just bring it back again.
Okay.
I wouldn't even,
Just let it die then?
yeah, I think we just let
Let
it
it
die.
die
and
for
I'll
lack
just-
of motion if
Yeah.
we could, or.
But we had the motion.
we had a motion. Can we postpone or
Do for,
table or?
do for lack of
Just
vote?
do a motion to amend to table.
Works for me, whatever you want to
And
do.
take it to the 20th, because I don't
Because I don't want
want
to
to try to do it by
postpone
the
it. We're
6th.
gonna, I would just as soon burn this to start over.
Yeah,
And then the
Honestly.
next item could die for lack of a
Same.
motion.
Yes, we
Don't
won't
make a
even,
motion.
Yeah, we're not even.
Yeah.
we won't
even consider that one.
I'll make a
So
motion to
when-
table resolution 2333.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Motion by Schneider, second by Rathe to table resolution 23-33.
I need a date to table it too.
Is that- The second one doesn't even need to be done, right? You can just vote.
Yeah,
We
we're,
have to have a date we're tabling it to.
I would, go ahead and table it to March 6th, because we can put together
We'll be ready
So,
for March 6th.
the information for that.
so postpone
To March
to March
6th.
6th.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So postponing this resolution 23-33 to March 6th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is our new motion on the table. Any further discussion? Roll call, Carla.
Birgen.
What are we voting on? We're voting.
To postpone.
Postpone to March 6th.
I thought that was.
No, we changed the motion with the voice vote. Now we have to vote.
It's a postponement.
We
You
have
just
a roll
voted
call
to postpone, so it
A
doesn't.
postponement is just a voice vote.
Yeah.
it's just voice.
Okay, all right. Any other time we've made a change of the motion, we've done a roll call, so, okay, as long as you're good with it, I'm good with it. Okay. Item 11 is null and void at this time. Section J, reports from boards and commissions. Item 1 and 2 is the Waverly Law Enforcement Board minutes of January 9th and February 13th of 23. Item 3 is the Airport Commission minutes of January 12th of 23. Item 4 is the Leisure Services Commission minutes of December 15th of 22. Item 5 is the Planning and Zoning Commission minutes of January 5th, 23. And item 6 is the Senior Center calendar of February 23 received in the record. Section K states Mr. Bronner.
Yes, sir, I think we have a few brief updates tonight, if you would, gentlemen.
I'll keep it quick. We've added an email address, publicservices@waverlya.com, trying to get it out there to the public. After hours, contact, something works better, people like to email, feel free, so share it. It's on the website. Be able to click on it, should pop up on an email. So.
Perfect, thank you, sir.
I'd like to congratulate Dr. Rathe on receiving the Spirit of Volunteerism Award. That's through the Waverly Health Center. And with that award comes, another award of $250, which she has decided to donate to the Community Sharing Gardens. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for all the things you do volunteering and other projects that you've donated to. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we have tonight, sir.
Thank you. Council comments?
Nothing for me.
Mr. Birgen?
I'll be quick. Congratulations to the boys wrestling for their state championship. I'm looking forward to Mardi Gras on Fat Tuesday tomorrow. Going to have my punchkis, hopefully. And anyone who wants to discuss city council comments, I will be at the poorhouse after city council meetings.
Nothing.
Ms. Belford? Darius?
No.
Nothing? Mr. Kangas?
Just seems like we're gonna have a full council chambers fairly soon.
Yes, sir. Be a nice thing, so. I just want to again apologize for the flub up on the resolution 23-27 with the roll call vote interpretation of the outcome on me. Just like you said, it was already in my notes there. You can go for the record that we're gonna have the full chambers on the study session this month. Looking forward to that to celebrate some youth victories. So with that, I entertain the motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned. Second.
Motion by Kangas, second by Schneider. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.